I met a gypsy.
To paint the picture for people, you were Orange Brigade 65, like factory ride.
I was the youngest sponsored KTM rider ever.
That's insane.
Yeah. It's probably been broken now, but at the time, 2013, I was 7. I was the first person that they had pretty much taken under their wing, and that's massive. Like, I had a Cobra deal before that, but it was nothing crazy. Like, I don't even know if I was getting free bikes. I don't think I was, but getting 6 bikes from KTM is at 7 years old. It's pretty wild. And then that led me into the GEICO thing, and then everyone kind of, we'll touch on that, but everyone knows how that ended. And it's been kind of for a second it was a slow bleed out for sure. Like, I was trying to save it and I just wasn't, and the walls were closing in, and I feel like I've revived myself for sure now, and I'm back on the on the right path. And
so what is getting 7 bikes or 6 bikes at 7 years old? Like, how does that? Because, I mean, it had never happened before, but, I mean, that's just like a wild thing to be like, a 7-year-old is so good that we're giving him all of this support. So, like, what were the first years of racing like? Why were you, like, how did you get that good? Like, how did that even come about?
So I guess we could start from the beginning, but my parents had me very young. My dad was 21.
Oh, really?
My mom was 19.
Wow.
So you talk about, like, I'm 21 right now. I don't have much figured out. Like, I'm ahead as far as money-wise more than most 21-year-olds. But besides that, like, I had a hard time deciding what I was going to put on this morning before I came to this. So it's like giving a 21-year-old kid and a 19-year-old kid their own child is pretty wild.
Where are they from, this area?
Yeah. My dad's originally from Arizona, but he moved out to California when he was 15 or 16, and my mom's from San Diego. That's where I was born and raised. So I grew up down there. But my parents had no idea about anything about moto. My dad bought a street bike when he was younger. I think he was 18 or something when he bought a street bike.
And that's what got your mom pregnant.
Yeah. My grandma wasn't happy about it.
Yeah.
So he sold it and went and bought a 1999 KX 125 and had no clue. He used to ride in Dickies and like Nike tennis shoes, down at like El Cajon. And he didn't even, the track wasn't a thing. It was like he'd go ride at El Cajon with his buddies, and then Glamis was like the place to be. And so no clue about racing. He did off-road racing, like desert stuff. And he had his own fab shop. And so he was building like buggies, trophy trucks. He did, that sort of thing. And I was going out and riding around in the desert, like on a Honda 50, just in circles while he went and raced. And fast forward, that was when I was 3, 4 years old. It probably started like, he didn't know, again, anything. Like, didn't know Supercross. He knew about it, but he didn't know how to get there. He didn't know Loretta's. He didn't know, the amateur scene. So everything was figured out on the fly. Went and got me a KTM when I was 5. I rode around just at like Elsinore, and somebody came up to him and was like, "Hey, your kid's pretty good. Like, you should take him to race." And it went from there. And so, I started at like the local Starwest, and then like I forget even after that, like we had a series called the Gold Cup. It went around Southern California.
Yeah.
So like that was kind of where I started, and then I went to public school up until I was I want to say 14, maybe 13, which was around the time I got the GEICO deal. So none of it was focused. Like, kids get homeschooled at 6 years old to race moto. That wasn't a thing for me. It was I rode maybe once during the week and once on the weekends if I was lucky. Again, like, we didn't have no money. we lived in an apartment basically, and my dad had to figure out how to keep the bikes together. Mom was working 2 jobs. He was working 2 jobs. Mom was going to school at night to try to get a degree. And so like the whole beginning of my journey was like rough. It wasn't what most kids have. And so it was just, I think that's kind of what instilled the fight in me, I guess.
Yeah, a bit of the grind, because it was always a grind.
It was always a grind. Like, I didn't know any different, you know? I was luckily pretty talented, like, naturally, but I still had to work hard at it. You know, I wasn't good enough to just hop on and be the best. Like, so I think from a young age, like, I really had to work hard, and it was always something I wanted to do. There was no doubts or second guessing, you know? It was from the time I was 5 years old, like, I wanted to be a Supercross racer. That was just that. There was no, I think to this day, I still haven't even thought about what I might want to do, you know, like outside of this. It's just, that's what had my eyes on, and, you know, never shifted the focus.
What are some of your memories from those early days? Like your first memories of just like wanting to be a pro Supercross rider? Were you like training, running and shit as a 5-year-old?
No,
like, what did it look
no,
like?
but, you know, just building jumps and like, just, you know, things like that. I remember, you know, there'd be days my dad would come home from work, and like my option was like stay and hang out with my buddies or go and ride at the track. And I can promise every time it was go ride. Like, I didn't give a damn about my friends who were hanging out in the neighborhood. Like, they were cool until I got that option to go ride. And I didn't need to go ride with anybody. I could go ride by myself and have a good time. Like, it was, yeah, I guess just the focus, like, was there.
So it was just always a thing that you just loved from day one.
Yeah. So, yeah, after that, you know, like 7, 8 was when it started to get serious. You know, still didn't have any money. Grandma helped me out a lot. She had a business, so she was able to help us, like, with some bikes and stuff. She traveled and was basically mom, because mom stayed home and worked. And they had my younger brother when I was 7. So that was when things ramped up, and she was staying home. So we traveled in like an 18-foot toy hauler.
Yeah.
3 of us in a truck and a trailer, 1 or 2 bikes if I had to. And just pretty much made it work. Like, it was, looking back now, I didn't know any different, but looking back, like, I definitely didn't have the nicest setup or, you know, I'd wear mixed match gear, but like, we made it work. And, you know, I'm so thankful for my parents and everyone else that helped me. Like, such a sacrifice looking back. Like, I didn't realize what was going on then. It was just, that was normal for me. But like, looking back, like, it's so gnarly what they went through to get me to this point.
All right, we'll go through, like, let's go back to like the Orange Brigade type days, you know. So you show a bit of talent, you're winning a lot of races, but there had to be like something fairly significant for KTM to give you that level of support. Like, how did that
Crazier
happen?
than you think.
Really?
Yeah. I won't name names, but there's somebody who ran the team, the Orange Brigade team, and my dad was friends with him. And my dad called him one day. I was getting support from Cobra, like I had mentioned, but my dad called him and said, hey, you know, like, there's no KTMs out there in the 50 class. You know, my kid's getting pretty good. Like, you know, what if we did like I'll buy one and then you give me a second 50 for half off? The guy says no. Like, not a chance, basically. And so my dad's like, all right, you know, it is what it is, whatever. Like, my dad was just trying to, like,
just cut costs a bit
and help them out. Yeah. Like, propose it to him in a way that's like, I'm going to help your brand and cut costs ultimately. Yeah. But like, he was also,
but there was an opportunity. He saw an opportunity.
He saw an opportunity, and my dad's always been that way. Like, you know, kind of go a different route. And so there's no chance, was what we were told. About 9 months later, we show up to a race, and it was just like an area qualifier. And normally I would park with my buddies or whatever, and we had nobody that was going that day, so we just parked by ourselves next to a guy with a 50. And he unloads it out of the truck, can't get it to start. My dad, he's pretty mechanically, smart, inclined. And so he worked on all my bikes, and this dude can't start his 50. And my dad goes and helps him. And then we're parked with this guy. We start chatting. We go and race. There was nobody there. I won by probably 30 seconds. Like, again, I wasn't really racing anybody, but I come off, and the guy's like, hey, what do we got to do to get you on a KTM? And my dad's like, well, I don't know. Like, whatever. They talked it out. 4 days later, we were rolling up to KTM to pick up 6 motorcycles. The guy we ended up parking next to was John Eric.
I was going to say, was it John Eric?
The president of KTM.
Wow.
He has a kid who is we were probably a couple months apart in age. And that was how it worked out. And actually, still to this day, one of my very close friends, John Eric,
he is a very good guy.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So when I stopped, or when I took my break, I actually trained him and his kid on the weekends, and I was training some other people during the week or whatever, and then I trained him and his kid on the weekends because his youngest son is sick on a downhill mountain bike.
Yeah.
Sick.
Yeah.
And John Eric had actually I don't know if he had stopped fully riding moto, but was riding less for sure. And so he called me and was like, hey, he was running the USMCA at that point, and I had signed up to be a coach, and he saw that on there, and he was like, hey, come and help me and Kai out, and, I'll pay you some money and go to the track with us. And yes, that was what I did for probably 2 or 3 months just on the weekends. And it's cool. But
that's unreal.
Yeah, the president of KTM called in 6 bikes for me, which is insane. And looking back now, kind of like I said, no better time to do this, right? Yeah. I truly believe there's a time and a place for everything.
Oh, 100%.
Everything happens for a reason. And so, I feel like that was, it happened for a reason. There was a reason that we were there that day.
Yeah, that's one of just life's crazy.
And just my dad being a nice dude, the kid could have been way better than me, could have beat me, and my dad would have helped him anyway. That was how my dad always was and still is.
I love that.
But yeah, just off of one nice, thing, it worked out for me in the craziest way.
So cool. I got one of my best friends to this day. I'm his son's godfather. Yeah. He moved into our town. I was working at a Kawasaki dealership. He came in. I tried to sell him a Kawasaki. He didn't want one. Went and bought a KTM. Saw him at the track with his new KTM 2 days later. I'm like, fuck this guy. And it was 40 degrees, 100 degrees.
Yeah.
Crazy hot, full summer Florida heat. He goes out, does 2 laps on this brand new KTM, gets a flat rear tire, starts loading up the bike to leave because he doesn't have any tools, doesn't know how to fix it. So I've gone over, I'm like, fuck, bring your bike over here. We had the quick shade and the whole setup. My dad changed his tire, and then he went over, and we're like, dude, go get your chair and sit under here. Hung out with us that day. That was fucking 20 years ago. He's
haven't looked back since.
One of my best friends to this day. It's crazy just those little moments in your life.
Yeah.
By leaning in and doing the right thing. You just don't know what
you really don't know what will come from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's I never understood really when I was younger. My dad always helped everyone, and I never understood why. And now that I'm older, I try to help everybody that I can, whether it's kids that are, just starting Supercross, or maybe a kid on a 65 or whatever, it could be anybody, but you just never know. And, I think it's most important to be a good person and a good human, right? If you can help somebody, I feel like you should. But also, you truly never know what could come from it.
Oh, man, 100%, eh?
Yeah.
So you get these bikes, and then that's obviously just a massive kind of step forward in your like career almost.
Yeah. I went to Loretta's that year. I think I was like one of 2 KTMs on the line at Loretta's that year.
In the
50 class, yeah. The KTM wasn't that great at the time. Like, it had a clutch issue when it got hot. So, and they kind of knew that as well. But then after that, I started doing all the testing for like the KTM 50s. And,
like what Zacho was doing.
Yeah. And actually, kind of to circle back to what we were just saying, one of my mechanics and best friends, Scott Youngstrand, who's half brothers with Michael Sleater, is somebody super close to me and helped me out. He was my mechanic my first year of Supercross, but the only reason that was even an option was because I had tested with him when I was 7 years old on a KTM 50.
No way.
Yeah, so that was super cool too, like an awesome opportunity.
Did you go to Austria for that?
I didn't go. I just did it here.
Yeah.
But you know, like I set up the bikes for like the next 5 years. So like bar position, lever position, all the things like that was how I set it up. At one point I did suspension testing. That was like basically it was called A kit for like a 50.
No way.
Yeah. Which was cool. I did like some tire tests. So all things like, you know, that are just looking back, like I didn't really know what I was doing then, but to look back, like it's so cool. Like I got to set up a bike for people to go and buy. Like they bought my setup. That's sick.
So it kind of, you stood out a little bit, but just because you're on the KTM before so many other kids.
Yeah. 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 And that kind of led me into like because I was on KTM, I got a Fox deal because of it. I was one of the youngest Fox like elite riders, and I was with them like all the way up until pretty much I went pro. There's like a couple, I don't even want to say years because I don't even think it was full years, but there were some times where I rode for like a team that, you know, conflicted and I had to go to a different gear brand. But like I was the only guy at GEICO that had the one-off gear deal when I was on the 150 and actually 250 as well. My whole stint there, I had a one-off Fox deal. So it was just little things like that the KTM kind of at a young age it helped me, and then, you know, 65s you all kind of blend. But yeah, on a 50 that was important.
So who were some of the kids you were racing at that time? Like who were your main rivals?
Ryder D.
Yeah.
LeBlanc.
Yeah.
Reynolds. My boy Voland.
Yeah.
He came a little bit later, but
so you guys went through AMS together.
Yeah.
That's sick.
I actually wasn't sure how we were gonna get along when I got there because like we've raced each other a good amount.
Really?
We laugh about it now, and this is a funny story. We were at a local race at Glen Helen, and I'm pretty sure I didn't beat him. He says I waxed his ass, but I'm pretty sure I didn't even beat him. I know I beat him one moto, but they protested me.
Really?
And they tore my bike apart, and I think it was Mike Burkeen maybe. You know, he measures, and he's like 63 cc's. So I didn't even have a 65. I had a 63.
That's awesome.
But yeah, Voland, LeBlanc, Romano,
yeah, right.
you know, guys like that.
Yeah.
That was all in that age group.
You just finished watching a clip from the full 3-hour podcast. You're on our Clips channel. The full podcast live on the Gypsy Tales podcast channel. It's linked right here. Go over to that channel, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and make sure you never miss a full episode of the Gypsy Tales podcast. If you don't want to watch it on YouTube, you want to watch it on the go, you can also head to our iTunes or Spotify to get the full 3-hour podcast in audio format.
I met a gypsy.